It's about information, inspiration, and insight that may spark something in your mind. Listen, I'm not trying to tell you what to think. I'm just trying to get you to think. It only takes a spark to start a fire, so let's spark it up. Listen, before we get into my subject tonight, I want to just tell you, listen, I want you to subscribe to the Village YouTube page or Dr. Louis T. Tait Jr. Subscribe. It doesn't mean you have to pay. It's free. But I need you to subscribe so you can keep following me and following our content and what we are doing. And listen, tonight I want to talk about Black mental health. You know, this is Mental Health Month, the month of May. So I thought it'd be appropriate to kind of talk about mental health amongst Black people. Now, most of you have heard amongst your family or your friends or your peers that Black people don't have time to feel anxious or to get depressed. You ever heard that before? Child, you don't have time. You got too much stuff to do. You got to make these deadlines. You got to take care of these chillins. And you got to do all this stuff. You know, you don't have time. And you think about that, and sometimes you just wonder, you don't have time really to take care of your mental health. So there's so much going on, and there's so much attention that our community needs, and so much work to be done, as we all know. So many issues to tackle. Black people have had to be resilient in order to survive in America and in the midst of white supremacy, in the midst of racist oppression in this country. So it is really taking a toll on us because we've had to be resilient. We've had to figure out how to survive. And so many of our young boys are taught never to show their emotions. Don't let them see you cry. Suck it up and keep moving on. Girls are taught to grin and bear it. And the same thing, don't show them, you know, how you really feel. Many of you were never even taught to pay attention to your feelings of anxiety or depression, or able to recognize signs of distress. Why you never stop. You know how it is. You just keep going. You sense something is wrong. You sense something is going. Sometimes you have friends and say, wow, something is quite not right with him. But we're almost afraid to broach the subject of, have you seen a therapist? Are you interested in seeing a therapist? Because in our community, if you say those words or you say anything that alludes to mental health, the first thing that comes out of somebody's mind, I'm not crazy. And Black people just don't do that. So mental health is still a stigma amongst Black people. When some people suggest that you might want to see a therapist, you just in trauma and distress, you're feeling, you know, we just hear it over and over again. Ain't nothing wrong with me. Yes, Black people are strong. We have survived slavery in America, colonialism in Africa, Jim Crow, and Reconstruction, the so-called war on drugs that was put on by Nixon and kept going by Reagan and Bush and Trump years, along with Clinton's crime bill, wars across the oceans and wars right here in our own backyard, as well as genocide. Our ancestors endured so much pain because of the inhuman treatment that they received by the hands of Europeans. So much trauma by the white enslavers. And they were just trying to survive, and which left them no time to deal with emotional trauma and the things that they were experiencing. Probably at the time, they had no words to even describe the depth of their pain. Dr. Rita Walker, in her book, and I challenge you to get it, it's a really good book, The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. And there's a title in chapter 1 is entitled, The Psychological Crisis is Real. Let's Fight for Our Sanity Together. In that chapter, she writes about the consequences of our lost identity. And I've talked about this for years, that if you don't know who you are and you've never been in touch with who you are, your ancestral roots, it's hard to have sort of a foundation when things hit you, because you don't know who you are. You don't know where you come from. And many in our community struggle with that. We have been the people who have endured under some pretty challenging layers of racist oppression, and now we have become more at risk for suicide than white people. There was a time in my life that it was rarely heard of in the Black community that someone was committing suicide. Now we have Black children committing suicide at an alarming rate. Dr. Walker mentioned that in 2016, studies indicated that the suicide rate amongst 5 to 11-year-old African American black children had exceeded that of their same age European American white peers. That is absolutely just mind blowing to me that children 5 to 8 years old, African American children, are committing suicide more than white children. You would have never heard that in my lifetime. It was a rarity that children are committing suicide. I remember, I think last year or a year or two ago, this is 2001, maybe 2019, there was a child not too far from where our church is in Southeast who had committed suicide, an elementary age child. It's just devastating. There's an indication there's a real problem going on here. Dr. Walker said this is in itself implies an epidemic in black mental health. You think when children are committing suicide, we've got a real problem. I asked myself, what could be going on in a 5-year-old or a 7 or 11-year-old African American black child's mind that will cause them to want to take their own life? And I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't really have an definitive answer to that. But perhaps our children have lost a sense of who they really are. From my perspective, our children are not being taught, nor is it being modeled for them, their connection to their culture, their heritage, and not just for the purposes of pride, but a purpose of having what I would call a mooring, a foundation. And it answers the fundamental question all of us always want to know: who am I? And when kids don't know that, when they're not affirmed for who they are, there are layers of stuff why people. It's not a simplistic answer in terms of why people commit suicide. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but we have to ask ourselves questions about what about their identity that causes them to want to do this. Dr. Walker said, I do believe that the emotional distress of our children is showing us that we are losing cultural wars, which for hundreds of years have protected many Americans from killing ourselves. And so this is a challenge for us today, as we go through this month, and particularly Black mental health, that we really sort of, get out of this notion that when you are seeking help, that when you notice something, and that we stop this narrative that in order, if you seek mental help or a therapist or psychologist, that you are crazy. No, you're not crazy. Matter of fact, you are really sane because you are really working to bring about your health in terms of way you're thinking. And when there is a mental health problem, it doesn't mean that you are less than a person. It means that you are a real person. You are important. But there's some things, some factors that you have to address, and we all have to address them. Listen, I want you to make sure that you tune in next week. Don't forget to subscribe to the Village Church DC on YouTube, and subscribe to my YouTube page with Dr. Louis T. Tait Jr. It's free. And also you can see us on Twitter too at Dr. Louis Tait. Look, have a good evening, and remember, take care of your mind.